In his seminal work on Stoicism, the philosopher and emperor Marcus Aurelius says, "Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, the arrogant, deceitful, envious, and unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil." And that's the topic we're talking about in this chapter. We're looking at what do you do when you have an employee, a subordinate, maybe a coworker, an equal, even worse, a boss, who's perpetually rude or arrogant or cruel for no reason. Well, Marcus Aurelius tells us the first thing we should do is be aware that that's going to happen to you. People behave that way, and that's pretty normal. So, first step is to do that. Another thing is a suggestion given by psychologist Deep Patel, who says, react to rudeness with kindness. Essentially, realize that rudeness comes from a place of ignorance most of the time. Most of the time, we don't want to attribute evil to someone's rudeness, unless it is something where you confront them about and they continue the behavior again and again and again, even if chastised, even if encouraged to change, they're still doing it again and again. Then maybe it is just a negative characteristic they have. But generally speaking, you can disrupt this rudeness with kindness, kill them with kindness, so to speak. And psychologists say that's actually fairly effective. It also creates, to some extent, some level of cognitive dissonance. That is to say that you break up the negative pattern of behavior, you break up the thought pattern, the word pattern, the style the person is using, and by breaking it up, you sort of create cognitive dissonance. They hold a belief that I'm right, and they are rude or arrogant about it. But then once they're confronted with this kindness and confronted and sort of validated a little, even though they may not feel like they should be, it does create that cognitive dissonance. You do have two different ideas running in the head at the same time, and it will break up that pattern and allow an effective leader to sort of introduce a new thought process. And the other thing that can help is moving someone's locus of control internally. So a lot of people who are rude, as Marcus Aurelius points out, are not rude because they're terrible people. They're rude because they're ignorant, or they've projected things out into the external world that they feel like nothing is inside of their range of control. Then they just want to lash out and engage in negative behavior. And one way to deal with that is after you have created that cognitive dissonance, after you have broken up that pattern of negative behavior, you want to move the locus of control internally. You want to let the person know they are in control and that they do have the ability to regulate themselves and to be a more productive and effective team member. And hopefully you can do this in a positive way where you're not really having to confront or harm somebody. But I think it's important to realize that sometimes being a little bit confrontational, a little bit direct or blunt even may be appropriate, but I would say that would be something you'd want to save. You'd want to try some more convivial approaches first. You would want to not take things personally. You do want to sort of, go through what the psychologists recommend that is, generally speaking, effective and will get you where you want to be. We started with a famous philosopher. I'd like to end with a philosopher, religious figure quotation from Jesus, though, where he points out that, before we go after other people, we really should look at ourselves first and make sure that we've cleaned up our own attitude, we've cleaned up our own assumptions, that we sort of thought this through a little bit before we just go out and confront somebody. And that's from the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 7. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye but fail to notice the beam in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, while there is still a beam in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the beam out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. And this is an important part of dealing with rude people as well, I found, is first thing is assume that they're ignorant, as Marcus really says. Assume that they don't realize the behavior. Break up that behavior through kindness, but also remember, hey, maybe they're being rude because I started it. Maybe I was rude a little bit. Have that moment of self-reflection. Break up the situation, break up the tension with kindness, with respectful behavior. And then, if all else fails, address it head on. And in all cases, make sure you're trying to move that locus of control from external to internal, giving the person a sense of accountability for themselves, but also giving them the confidence that they are in control of the situation and do have the ability to change and project better behavior. All right, well, I think that's the answer I want to give for this video, and we'll see you in the next one.